I am here doing my Definitive Zelda Tier List because I have played through every single Zelda game from start to finish. No particular order in how I played them, but I played all of them. Hydrate. Thanks, Dylan. Love Sprite. I had Wendy's earlier today, and it was absolutely delicious. That's all about that. Yes, no particular order on how I played them. I just kind of played them how I felt like it. Obviously the Oracle games I played in order, and Breath of the Wild I did last. Nuggets are always a good time, really regardless as to where you are. But since I have now played through all of the Zelda games, I am the sole authority on the Zelda games. So I need to get my list out there on every Zelda game where they belong on the tier list. So here we go. Starting with the very first one, Zelda 1. Wasn't the first game that I played in this playthrough, but I did play through it in one sitting, and I 100%ed it, and it was a absolutely fantastic time. I love this game. Sometimes when I just get bored, I just play through it because it's such a good time. I personally love it. Now there are things that frustrate me about it because it is an NES game. It is the first of the series. Like keys, for instance, are really annoying, but that's just because keys are keys. But they're not as annoying as in later instances. It's just so good. I love it. Honestly torn between putting it in S or putting it in A. But I think I'm gonna put it in an A tier. Wind Waker. First one that I did in my playthrough of Zelda games. I played through it in one sitting as well because I'm crazy. Loved every single minute of it though. The music in it, absolutely phenomenal. The story is fantastic. The characters, the writing, I love it so much. There's a reason why I played through it in one sitting, and at the mark of 1 year of me playing every Zelda game, I played through it again in one sitting. It was just such a good time. Everything about this game I love. So, like, it's definitely one of my favorite Zelda games. I think it's going to go in S tier. Hyrule Warriors. I did not play it in my playthrough of Zelda games because it is not an official Zelda game, but I have played through it before. It's a good time. I grew up playing like the Dynasty Warriors games on the PlayStation 2, and they were always such a fun time. So I think as a Zelda game, it's not really a Zelda game. There's a reason why I haven't beaten Age of Calamity yet, even though I really want to. But it's not 100% a Zelda game. So I'm gonna be putting that in a nice solid C tier. Four Swords Adventure for the GameCube. And nobody talks about this game, which is ridiculous. I had such a good time playing through it. I don't even really remember getting frustrated at all at any parts. Like, even by the keys, like, the music was always such fun remixes of, like, other classic things. Like, it is a little forgettable, but a good time when you do it. Like, there's a group of people in this Zelda game that nobody talks about. They are referred to as the Zani tribe. They reside close to Gerudo Desert. Only appear in this game. Maybe they have some connection to the Zonai in Breath of the Wild. Maybe they don't. Who knows? I loved the game, but I think I'm gonna slap it in a solid, well, torn between C or B. I think I'm gonna slap it in a solid C tier. Now, A Link to the Past 4 Swords. It is a super solid remake of A Link to the Past. It is so down pat as a remake that most people don't even realize that as a remake, but it is a complete ground up recreation of A Link to the Past. Now, this honestly is on here for the 4 Swords. But I feel like I gotta talk about both aspects of it. Now, the 4 Swords itself, though, it's unfortunate that the original version of it was only 4 players. Like, each player had to have their own Game Boy and their own copy of A Link to the Past 4 Swords. And there had to be at least 2 link cables. I believe just 2. So it was really inconvenient. Well, you didn't need like 4 to do it. You could do it with just 2. But regardless, that's still 2 players that need the game and a Game Boy. So it was really inaccessible for a lot of people. Now, luckily, that game probably would be improved if it was put on the DS. Now, that's where I was actually just about to go. They did release, on the 25th anniversary of, on the 25th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda, they released the 4 Swords Anniversary Edition as a DSiWare, where you could play the game and have it be single player for the first time. And it was absolutely brilliant, and I loved it, and I played through it. Like, honestly, kind of lackluster. Really gimmicky, to be, like, completely honest. And since then, I don't think you can get the 4 Swords like game anymore, because it was never a physical release, and I think they removed it from the store shortly after. So I think I'm gonna slap that in the D tier. Now, Minish Cap. Oh boy, Minish Cap, such a good game. When it came to the Game Boy games, I had to play through the original copies because, like, I had the original copies, and I have a GameCube with a Game Boy player and a Game Boy player disc. So I had to get the most authentic experience possible for myself. Such a good time. The music is like, I'll say it once and I'll say it again for every single Zelda game. The music is absolutely fantastic. I cannot get over, like, Koji Kondo and Nintendo in general, since he didn't really work on Breath of the Wild or Zelda 2. Which is unfortunate, but hey, the music in Breath of the Wild is still phenomenal, and the music in Zelda 2 is absolutely fantastic. But the music in every other Zelda game, ooh, Koji Kondo, you are a musical mastermind. The story of the game, it's so clever, and I want like the Picori to show up later on in like Breath of the Wild 2 or something. I want like some remnants, some mention of them. Like they don't have to like be there, but I want like some kid maybe to like mention like little people running around doing things or something like that. I just think that that would be so cool. The final boss, honestly, a little frustrating if I'm going to be completely honest. But the final boss cannot like be a rock to pull the whole game down. 100%, I believe the game is like a solid B tier. With the kinstone fusing and all, there is some that are like specific to the game, like working. You don't necessarily need all of them to 100% the game, but like you do need all of them to 100% the game. But I think it's a solid B tier. Now, Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask. Do not even get me started on Majora's Mask. I absolutely love Majora's Mask. I own almost every single version of Majora's Mask. I'm only missing the European version. And then I own every single copy. Like, type of copy. The music, like, it was my first Zelda game. I got my N64 for Christmas with Majora's Mask in like 2000, 2001, somewhere around there. I want more darker Zelda games like this, and I hope so much that Breath of the Wild 2 will be dark. Like, the darker atmosphere in these games just gives it like such a good like aura and feeling, and I love it so much. Like, your favorite is either Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, or Majora's Mask. And like the story in it, the transformation masks, I love that. And I like, they're only in this game, and like without a shadow of a doubt, double S tier. They're only in this game. Like, yeah, they introduce masks in Ocarina of Time with just like the Mask of Truth and the bunny hood that didn't do anything, the spooky mask, the skull mask, the Gibdo, not the Gibdo, the Gerudo mask, the Zora mask, the Goron mask. And I'm missing one mask, I believe. But they don't do anything, except for the Mask of Truth, where you can talk to them. No, not the Fierce Deity. That is not in Ocarina of Time. God, if it was, though. But I want masks in some sense to come back. Like, if they say, like, the gods were very angry in Majora's Mask, but I want, like, in Breath of the Wild 2, since it's safe to assume that the entity that is like all shackled up and everything is Ganondorf. I think I said the skull mask, but I could be wrong. I'd have to look at a picture to be sure, which I will actually pull up a picture. But after so since it's safe to assume that Ganondorf is the one that is like shackled up and like in the trailer for Breath of the Wild 2, it's safe to assume that the Sheikah then are the ones that like found them up, since they're the ones that like built all the stuff and everything. So I want the Mask of Truth in some way to be found in like that basement where like Ganondorf is, since the Mask of Truth is used for like mind reading and like possible interrogation and whatnot. And so like the mask doesn't necessarily have to do that, but like I want it to just be there. I want masks to come back in some way, shape, or form. But let's take a look at the masks in Ocarina of Time real quick, just so I can be positive. Oh, the Keaton mask. That's the one I'm missing. Yeah, that's the one I couldn't remember. But anyway, moving on then. Ocarina of Time. It is a fantastic game. Absolutely, my god, the story. It's amazing. I, however, do not think it is the best Zelda game. I think it is just a C, well, not C, an S tier. It is still absolutely amazing, and you have to play it. But it's not the best that there is. The story is such a romantic tale, and not romantic as in like romance and everything, but romantic in like the literary sense. It's such a good time, and like there's so much subtext and everything. I cannot get over how good Ocarina of Time is. But it's only an S tier. Breath of the Wild, I just beat Breath of the Wild like maybe half an hour ago. The music in it, I cannot get over. It is so subtle and ambient. It makes you feel ways that like Zelda games haven't. Likely because of the fact that Koji Kondo didn't do it, so they had a different group of people creating different feelings. However, if Koji Kondo did the music, oh my god. There is like secret songs in Breath of the Wild where if you like listen to the music sped up, you get like other, like you get old Zelda songs, since they weren't technically allowed to like fully redo old songs. Garrus is just here. He's just doing stuff with a bear, so he keeps drawing my attention. But when it comes to like being a Zelda game, I have hiccups. When it comes to being a Zelda game, I believe it's lacking. And I'm not the only one who thinks this. I miss the traditional dungeons, and I miss the traditional way of gaining items. Now, I love the like multiple different swords and things that you could get, but like I miss like claw shots, and I miss like, I don't know, other like, I miss traditional Zelda items that just work in the ways that they do. They're good times. So because of that, I'm only gonna put Breath of the Wild in an A tier. It's a great story, it's a great experience, and everyone needs to play it. And I can 100% understand why, if it's your first Zelda game, it will be your favorite Zelda game. But as it is my most recent Zelda game, well, technically Oracle of Ages is my most recent Zelda game. It is the most recent Zelda game, though. I have played essentially all of them beforehand, and it is just different enough to go back a few, but it is just so good that is better than most. Now, Oracle of Ages and Seasons, nobody talks about them because they're just like, they're just the Game Boy Color games. Barely anybody has Game Boy Color games these days. and you can only really still get them on the DS, like the 3DS eShop, which isn't going to be a thing anymore soon. Dating this video, stream, oh, whatever, I don't know. So soon you're not going to be able to play them anymore, which is super unfortunate, because I loved them. I loved the linking aspects of the game, like the way that you would get like codes from one game to use in the other game to get weapons like the Bigoron sword, or the Master Sword, or the Mirror Shield, like all just such good times. Such a unique experience, and I adore it so much. I think both Oracle of Seasons and Ages, solid A tiers. Oracle of Seasons is a much more combat-driven game. So you go around, and it's a lot more like fighting. It itself was actually supposed to be a remake of the first Zelda game, but eventually, really shortly into development, they decided to do their own thing. These were also the first Zelda games to be developed not entirely by Nintendo. They were done by Capcom. So was Minish Cap. All fantastic games. Oracle of Ages, on the other hand, is much more puzzle driven. So you have to like think a lot about what you're doing and everything, and it's just together, you can play them in whatever order you want. Like, you can start with Ages and then get the code to go into Seasons, or what I did was I started with Seasons and then I went into Ages. Also good. Oracle of Seasons was one of my first Zelda games that I ever played, but I honestly didn't ever beat it until I started streaming this. And Oracle of Ages, I always wanted to keep as a blind experience for when I beat Seasons. So I was lucky that going into playing Oracle of Ages, like a 20-plus-year-old game, I was able to have it be a blind experience for somebody that has played every single Zelda game as they've come out from Majora's Mask onwards. Which is super fun, and it was a super unique experience, and I loved it so much. Now, Twilight Princess. Ooh, boy howdy. It is another Zelda game that has a dark atmosphere. And, like, as I said, like, your favorite Zelda games are either Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, or Twilight Princess. And it's definitely one of my favorite Zelda games. The music in it is just foreboding in such a perfect sense that it creates a perfect atmosphere for just the story that the game is trying to tell. And the way that they do the lighting in the game itself, because a lot of the game takes place at twilight, it's just so pretty. It's such a pretty looking Zelda game. And it's definitely a double S tier for me. I adore it. Like, honestly, the first thing that I think of as like a folly isn't even really one, and it's the light bugs, and you only have to do that 3 times, and it's great, and I love it. Like, you get to explore the area, learn the things, like learn the pathways for when you go there as a human. You already know where you're going. You have a rough idea. You just need to then figure out the puzzles for the things that are actually there that can see you. And like the boss of the light bug that you fight in Lake Hylia, such a clever boss. I love it. The biggest folly of the game isn't even a folly. That's all I can say about it. Now, Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. I have said this a lot. I adore this game. It is one of my favorite Zelda games, and I can actually speedrun this Zelda game in like 3 or 4 minutes, 5 at most maybe. And it's such a fun game. It's so uniquely built, and the music in it. It's like Koji Kondo comes back for Zelda 3, and he comes back with slaps. I find that surprising for you. I honestly thought you'd place Wind Waker higher than Twilight Princess. Well, like... honestly... Wind Waker... I don't know if I'm thinking of Wind Waker base when I just look at this, but Wind Waker HD honestly has fixed a lot of things. No, I'm gonna stick with this. Twilight Princess. I love the music in Wind Waker more because it's just such a like adventurous, good feeling. It really is. But the music in Wind Waker is so adventurous, so happy, so perfect. Twilight Princess, just a cut above. I just like the darkness. If Wind Waker, I don't want to say if it was darker I would like it better, because if Wind Waker was darker it wouldn't be Wind Waker. But I'm gonna stick with my guns here. Twilight Princess SS, Wind Waker S. But if I'm being completely honest, it's like, it's a borderline thing here, but I can't do borderlines. But yes, back to A Link to the Past. Koji Kondo has come back with slaps. Like, banger after banger after banger with this game. Like, every single song hits. The dungeons are so well laid out. Like, it's a true return to formula. From, like, Zelda 1 created the Zelda formula. Koji Kondo was there, and he did his best with his chip tunes and made some absolutely memorable and iconic tunes. And then Zelda 2 happened, they switched things up a little, and then they came right back with Zelda 3, right back to what everyone wanted, and better than ever. So I fully, wholeheartedly believe, I'm gonna say it's an S tier. It's a solid S tier. Triforce Heroes, it's a weird one. I barely really count it as an official Zelda game, but like it's developed by Nintendo. It has the Legend of Zelda. I've only played it on emulator. My physical copy, I haven't even opened it, but I do own it. It's a fun game though. It's a fun puzzler. But it's gimmicky. So I'm gonna say it's a D tier along with Four Swords. But still a good time. Now Spirit Tracks, oh boy. Spirit Tracks, the music in Spirit Tracks is genuinely one of the best, like, soundtracks in any Zelda game. I saw a tier list where somebody rated Tingle's Freshly Picked Rosy Rupee Land higher than Spirit Tracks. which is what really affirmed to me that I have to make my tier list the definitive Zelda tier list, so everybody knows the actual like listing here. The story in it is so good as well. Like, it's one of the few direct sequel Zelda games, Phantom Hourglass first and then Spirit Tracks. Takes place roughly 80 to 100 years later. But it's so good. The story feels so good. The bond between Link and Zelda is one of the most genuine bonds between Link and Zelda that like have happened. Next to Breath of the Wild, honestly. But most of the bond happened off screen. All of the bond happened on screen. So I fully, like, I love Spirit Tracks. Everything wrong with Phantom Hourglass, they fixed with Spirit Tracks. And it's brilliant. Spirit Tracks is a solid A tier. I'm gonna jump right over to Phantom Hourglass just because, like, I'm still talking about it. Phantom Hourglass, however, yeah, the music is good, and it's also a direct sequel. One of the other few direct sequels. It goes Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks. But it is so gimmicky. But like, it's the first Zelda game for a new system, so they're trying to show off everything, but it really became too much of a tech demo as a Zelda game, and that's really unfortunate because they shoehorned in absolutely every single feature that the DS had to offer. It used the microphone, it used the double screens, it used the closing of the screens, and it used the touch screen, which is fine, but you move with the touch screen, you attack with the touch screen, you never touch the D-pad in this game. Which is a little ridiculous if you ask me. But it is what it is. I had so much trouble with drawing the hourglasses, though, fighting the last boss. I think I spent a total of 5 hours fighting that last boss alone. Just because of when that's between 2 streams. Absolutely ridiculous. It's a solid B tier Zelda game. It's a great story. I wouldn't even say it's a great story. It's a good story. I love the story. But there's better. But there's also worse. Now, Zelda 2. I just hit my mic stand. I hope that didn't make a noise. Zelda 2. It is the second Zelda game. They didn't have a definitive, like, Zelda formula laid out yet. So they tried something new. The first one was a top-down adventure game. The second one was a side-scrolling RPG with also some top-down adventures. SSS tier, so good and close to perfection. They never attempted another Zelda game in that art style. Honestly. Like, Majora's Mask would be in SSS tier if there was an SSS tier. Because they... Well, I do actually agree. It would be. It is its own thing. Like, would it be like an F tier or an SSS tier? But no, Majora's Mask. It's also, they never did anything like it. It again, But it's a fun game. It's a unique game. It's a weird game, but the music is fun. I don't remember who did the music, but it wasn't Koji Kondo. But it did introduce some classics, like the temple theme, which everybody knows from Smash. But if I'm being honest, I'm gonna say it's a B tier. I mean C tier. Well, if I wanted B tier, like if my brain just said B tier, then I wanted it to be B tier. Yeah. Skyward Sword, the most controversial Zelda game. Nobody can really agree on it, because when it first came out, people didn't like the motion controls, people didn't like the stamina gauge, people didn't like Fee, nobody liked anything about it because it had such a long delay that they built up such high expectations that nothing satisfied them. I, on the other hand, loved it. I got the collector's edition with the Wiimote, I got the soundtrack, I even have the cardboard cutout that GameStop had for advertising the game. I beat the game, I got the game and I just played right through it. I loved it. I was be on Skype calls with my friends and I narrated it to them, and I gave everyone voices. That's where I got the voice for Girahim. And I would go, I started calling Link Protagonist. Well, hello there, Protagonist. I will burn you satisfyingly to a quest. The biggest issue I had with the motion controls is that they would get out of sync and I would just have to set it down and resync it. Not an issue. Now, when I streamed it, I played the Switch version, the HD remake, because it just came out and I had to play it just as it came out. And every single issue that people had, they fixed. Fee didn't talk near as much. I didn't have an issue with Fee ever, but people did, and so Fee didn't talk as much. There was now a complete complete button control. You use the control stick with the sword. I could play the game, I played the game with this controller. My favorite part of the game is the Thunder Dragon. Yeah, the Thunder Dragon. So fun. The boss gauntlet that you could go through to get the Hylian shield. It was the first Zelda game to introduce hero mode as well. And if you did the Thunder Dragon there as well, you could fight Demise, just the last boss. So that's fun. I love the story. It is so good. The music in it is absolutely phenomenal. And even the song right now, one of the last songs that plays in the game, Fee's Farewell, right at the end of the game, so good. I love Skyward Sword. It's not a double S tier though. Skyward Sword tier, but the Skyward Sword tier. But no, genuinely, it's a solid A tier of a Zelda game. Now, Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. I played through it on the Switch. The Switch remake was absolutely fantastic. The art style of it, so unique, so clever, so fun. I want them to do Oracle of Seasons and Ages in the same style. I love that this is the original Game Boy version, not even the XD version that they released. Hey, I'm at 1,690 views. 69. But I love it. The story is so fun and unique. The music, genuinely, like Ballad of the Windfish, is. Oh, one second. You want out? No? All right, then don't complain. Don't sit at the door and like scratch at it if you don't want out. You want me to play with you? I will later. Continuing where I was. Oh wait, the Zelda music ended. Whoops, I'll just restart it. Yes. Ballad of the Wind. Ballad of the Windfish is genuinely one of my favorite Zelda songs. It feels so good, and I was able to actually teach myself how to play it on piano just from ear. And it's so fun. The story, like, each dungeon feels so unique and apart from any other dungeon. It's a good time. However, there's so many better Zelda games. Like, it is the first Game Boy Zelda game. It is the first handheld Zelda game. So they did a lot to try and like condense it down to be what it is. It's still a great game. I love it. But I'd say it's a B tier. Between A and B, but closer to B. And the last Zelda game on this tier list is Link Between Worlds. It doesn't belong there. I was able, like, I played it on emulator because I cannot really, I don't have a 3DS capture card. Sue me, please don't. It's another one of the few sequel Zelda games. It takes place a few hundred years after A Link to the Past. And it's the first 3DS Zelda game that is like in on itself unique. Like, there was Ocarina of Time 3D, which is the definitive way of playing Ocarina of Time, if you can. And there's Majora's Mask 3D, which is not the definitive way to play Majora's Mask. Please, if you could, play the original N64 version or the Wii Virtual Console. Not Wii U, Wii. It had a lot of, like, the 3D in the game was also well done. It was a good 3D. It really illustrated the depth and showed where you would go on the floors below when you had to drop down and everything. The merging into the walls, so unique, like, so clever and so fun. I loved it. And I love that the Majora's Mask was in it, and I would always like hop on the wall, go in behind the Majora's Mask, and then pretend I'm wearing it. But that's because I'm just a nerd. I loved Ravio, and I found it so unique the way that it had like non-linear linear progression, where you could go to whatever dungeon you wanted in whatever order, kind of like how you could in A Link to the Past, but instead of getting items in the dungeon, you would get the items from Ravio. You could rent them, but if you died, you lost them, but you could later on buy them. I think you might have still gotten some items from dungeons, but for the most part, the items you got were all from Ravio. So it was unique there, which really kind of started the whole like non-linear item gathering, because the next game that came out was Breath of the Wild. But I loved it. I loved Link Between Worlds. And like the little twists at the end, so fun. I saw some of them coming, but whatever, they were fun. They're good twists. Genuinely, it's a solid A tier Zelda game. If you have a 3DS, definitely play it. If you have Surtra and you don't care about stuff, like if you can like, if you have the cartridge, like if you have a copy and you can like dump it and can play it on Surtra, because Surtra has a lot of really good like quality of life things. Like you can bind keys to the touchscreen. So if you can dump your cartridge and play it on emulator, I would definitely recommend doing that too. So this here then, honestly, Wind Waker's double S tier. This is my definitive Zelda tier list. The best Zelda games are double S tier, Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, and Wind Waker. Specifically Wind Waker HD. Play Wind Waker HD if you can. S tier, Ocarina of Time, Link to the Past. Both fantastic games. So, like, instrumental in what Zelda would become, both of them. A tier, like a solid classic game. If you have the opportunity, I would highly recommend playing any of these games, regardless of where you are in like Zelda knowledge. Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages, Spirit Tracks, Skyward Sword, Link Between Worlds. B tier, genuine, like all great, absolutely fantastic games. I feel like this is actually a C tier. All absolutely great games. Play them if you get the opportunity, but they're different. They feel different, but they're still great. There is no misses here. There's Minish Cap, Zelda 2, and Link's Awakening. C tier, there is Hyrule Warriors, Four Swords Adventure, and Phantom Hourglass. Great games, different from other Zelda games, as Hyrule Warriors is a Koei Tecmo game, and this is the first DS Zelda game, and this is a like an almost 4-player Zelda game that nobody played. You'd be forgiven to never play any of these, but I wouldn't turn them down if given the opportunity to play them. D tier, like, you can get away with not playing them. Most people get away with not playing them. We got Four Swords for the Game Boy, not the same Four Swords. Four Swords Adventure, Four Swords, and Triforce Heroes. They're very gimmicky, very like, oh, I'm a multiplayer Zelda game, you have to do multiplayer and do the things. And so is Triforce Heroes. But this is 4-player, this is 3-player. But both can, I think, yeah, both can be however many players you want, but this can cap at 4 players, this can cap at 3 players. But the faction in this game is a lot more fun. So I would recommend Triforce Heroes over Four Swords. but they are still good games. And that there is my definitive Zelda tier list. Here we are. Agree or disagree, it doesn't matter, because I am right. I am the only authority on this matter. Nobody can say otherwise, because I have played through all of them within a year. So I know them.